So this is the last session on a walkthrough of the Old Testament, an overview of the Old Testament, and we are now on the second part of the writings. So just to refresh our memory of about what the writings is all about. So if only I can get it working. Right. So the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, divided into three sections: the Law, the Prophets, and the Writings, the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. And we are now looking at the writings. The previous session, we did the poetry side of the Ketuvim, and today we are looking more at the mostly narrative side, okay, of the Ketuvim, of the writings. All right, so we'll be covering Ruth, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles. We'll not be covering them in this order. There is an internal logic, at least in my mind, as to how I'm covering it. I'm going to start with Ezra, Nehemiah to provide the historical context of everything that we're going to be talking about today. And so we're going to start with Ezra, Nehemiah. Why is it called Ezra, Nehemiah? In your Bible, the book of Ezra is the book of Ezra, and the book of Nehemiah is the book of Nehemiah. But originally, they were one scroll. There were not two scrolls. There wasn't a scroll called Ezra, another scroll called Nehemiah. I guess for brevity purposes, or rather to be able, for whatever reason, at some point, these books, Ezra and Nehemiah, this book, Ezra and Nehemiah, was divided into two. One focusing, I suppose, more on Ezra's ministry, and another one on Nehemiah's ministry. But that's also a bit artificial because Ezra also makes Ezra is also there in the book of Nehemiah. And not all of the book of Ezra is about Ezra. You know what I mean? It's also about Zerubbabel, etc. So the book should be a single book, Ezra, Nehemiah. Okay, so first we want to cover the historical context behind Ezra, Nehemiah. Remember, Israel was once one country, the United Kingdom of Israel, under King Saul, and then King David and King Solomon. And after King Solomon, the next king, King Rehoboam, Solomon's son, made a blunder that allowed for 10 tribes to depart. All right, to split away, 10 tribes split away from the dynasty of David to establish the northern kingdom of Israel. And so the David's dynasty was only they were only in control of the south, of the southern tribe of Judah and also Benjamin, right? The northern 10 tribes are now under Jeroboam. And the northern tribes of Israel, they were the first. That country came to an end in 722 BC with the Assyrian conquest. And southern Judah itself fell to Babylon in 587, 586, depends on how you count, right? So with these two countries going into extinction, so of course the peoples are still there, the people still exist, just that the country is no more. And in that situation, there was some prophetic expectation. There's the expectation that one day we will return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple and the return of the Lord to the temple, and the nations will come to worship the Lord. And all this will be accomplished through the Messiah, right? So if you read Isaiah, you read Jeremiah, you read Ezekiel, there is that expectation that, yes, we are now exiled, but one day we will return from exile, we will rebuild our temple, and all the nations will come to Jerusalem because the Lord, who has abandoned us off, right, has abandoned us, will return back to Jerusalem, back to his temple, and all these things will be accomplished through their leader, the Messiah, the anointed one, the son of David. A new Davidic king will arise and will restore the kingdom of David and bring it to greater height. So that is during the exile of Babylon. So some about 50 years later, they did come back with the Edict of Cyrus. What happened is that Babylon itself collapsed under its own weight, I suppose, and the kingdom was taken over by the Persians. And Cyrus was that Persian king, and he came to Babylon, and his decision was to send all the exiles back. Right? What's the point of keeping them here in Babylon? What are they even doing here? Send them back to their to where they came from, so that we can have an empire, right? We can have a worldwide empire, multicultural. And so with that Edict of Cyrus, in 539, a group of Jews who were exiled returned under the leadership of Sheshbazzar, about 539 BC. And that fizzled out. Not much is known about that initial return. A more well-known return is in the 30s. I mean, from after 39, probably, I don't know, 32, 33, something about where Zerubbabel brought another group of Jews to return to Jerusalem, and there they rebuilt the temple, or rather that generation rebuilt the temple. Haggai and Zechariah, these two prophets, they ministered around the 20s, and the temple was rebuilt in 516. So this is the Zerubbabel return. And then there's another convoy, another caravan of returnees by Ezra in 458. The numbers get smaller and smaller. You may not be used to it because this is BC, right? BC. So Ezra is a priest. He brought another group of people to return from Babylon to Jerusalem, and in 446, Nehemiah brought another group of people to return to Jerusalem. So as you can see, that the return, just as the exile wasn't like one single exile, but there are many exiles, all right, that leads to the ultimate exile. The return from exile is also not like one whole, all the Jews return all at the same time, but rather they come back in batches. And perhaps the majority of them never actually come back, right? So never actually came back. So these are the various returns from exile that is recorded in the book of Ezra, Nehemiah. So eventually the Persian Empire also got conquered by Alexander the Great, and that established the Hellenistic Judea. Hellenistic Judea, that means Greek Judea, in 332 BC, where that region was conquered by Alexander the Great. Okay, so this is the historical context of the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, the exile, and then there is a prophetic expectation that we are going to come back from exile to rebuild the temple, and the Lord will return, and the nations will come to worship the Lord, and the Messiah will show up and get all these things done, right? So that is the idea. That's the idea, okay, behind these historical movements. So with that, we come to the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. The book of Ezra and Nehemiah is not like a, obviously when you read it, you hear different voices in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. Sometimes, for example, there is the Nehemiah's memoirs, right? Where Nehemiah speaks in first person. Okay, and there is a narrator, right? And there is Nehemiah who's speaking, and there are stories that preceded Nehemiah, such as Zerubbabel and Ezra and so on and so forth. So therefore, the person or the group or whatever, the people who are responsible to put Ezra and Nehemiah together to compile this narrative of the Ezra and Nehemiah period had access to various sources. such that we have Nehemiah talking in first person. Does that make sense? That means the whole book is not written by Nehemiah because we're talking about stories that's before Nehemiah, but there are places where Nehemiah speaks in the first person. That I did this, I did that, Lord, remember me. That kind of a thing. Which means that the author has access to various sources and he's putting all these sources together to build a narrative. Okay. So he has access to, for example, Ezra memoir and also Nehemiah's memoir, whereby Ezra and Nehemiah wrote in the first person. Okay. So their diary, basically access to the diary. The author, I'll just use him in the singular, right? The author also have access to official documents such as decrees. Okay. So King Cyrus makes a decree. So he has access to those decrees. And he also have access to correspondences, letters that's also included in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, right? So, and he also have a set of lists, okay? Inventory list, stuff that we brought back, how many golden vessels we brought back, how many silver vessels we brought back, okay? The returnees, the names of those who came back, who is who is who, who is who, who is who, and he has other name lists, all right? So these are some of the things that he has in front of him, that he has collected in front of him in order to compile a narrative. Does that make sense? Okay. So Ezra and Nehemiah, clearly there are sources such as Ezra's memoir, Nehemiah's memoir, decrees, letters, inventory, returnees, other name lists. Meaning to say, Ezra and Nehemiah are characters in his work, the author's work. And sometimes he allows Ezra to speak, sometimes he allows Nehemiah to speak from their memoir. He brings in decrees, letters, name lists, etc. Can you appreciate that? That there's this guy who's sitting there writing something, and he has all these historical records in front of him, and he's slotting them in various places. But over and above all of that, he has what? He has a story he wants to tell, a message he wants to send that may or may not be the same message that Ezra himself wanted to say or Nehemiah wanted to say. You know what I mean? If I were to write a book about the road to Merdeka, right? The road to Merdeka, and I have Tunku Abdul Rahman's memoir, I have On Jafar's memoir, I have the British side as well. We have letters, correspondences, right? Okay, and various commissions that went into that constitutional convention, etc. All of that, and a list inventories of what is a census and all of that, right? I have all of that together. That I write a narrative that sometimes includes entire paragraphs of citations from Tunku Abdul Rahman, entire citations from the sultans, citations from the other politicians, and so on and so forth, right? These guys are not the authors, right? I am the author, and I have a message to tell, and I use quotations, full-length quotations from them to put inside. I've got no idea that I'm writing this. You know what I mean? So my message is, and their message at some places coincide, and some places diverges. Can you tell can you appreciate this? It's a lot of blank stares. All right. So let's just say we have a clear canvas, a scroll. This is the Ezra Nehemiah scroll. And Ezra Nehemiah scroll is divided into 4 sections. One is on the Zerubbabel section, chapter 1 to 6 of Ezra, and then chapter 7 to 10 focuses on Ezra. So Ezra is actually a minor character in the scroll of Ezra. You see, so Zerubbabel, and then Ezra chapter 7 to 10, and then Nehemiah in Nehemiah 1 to 7, and then Ezra and Nehemiah in chapters 8 to 13. All right, so there are these 4 very clear-cut sections of the book. And what the author does is that he has his own compositions, but he also then at different places slot, all right, sources into various places in his scroll. So, for example, he starts off with a decree, right? Cyrus makes a decree. First, he makes some initial commentary. Here is the decree, and then he gives the decree from Cyrus, and more stories, and then he has a list of returnees, and then he gives the inventory of things that they brought back from Babylon, and then he writes some more stories, and then he includes a letter, and then he includes another decree as a result of the correspondence that they wrote to the kings. Right? They wrote something to the king, and the king came back with a decree, and then more letters, more decrees, then more stories, and then more decrees, and then Ezra. Then Ezra comes in, and then Ezra starts to speak in the first person. So I include something from Ezra's diary into it. And then I have a list of returnees. No, what is this? And so on and so forth. So it's just basically Nehemiah's memoir, more name lists, etc. And then it closes with Nehemiah's memoir, right? So you can appreciate that these are sources to a greater work that the narrator is putting together. Okay. Now, so that is how the book of Ezra and Nehemiah come together. So one skill set that you need to have in reading Ezra and Nehemiah is to discern what is the source saying, okay, but what is the author saying? What is he trying to say? Does he agree? Does he disagree? All right. Or is it just something that moves the story forward? Because sometimes we think this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God, right? And then we read it like as though we're reading Galatians or something. No, we are reading the author citing sources to show a particular point that he wants to show. He could be saying, he could be just very neutral. This was what happened. It could be, yeah, this is what I support, right? This is why we have this. I agree, right? Or this is, or it could be, unfortunately, this happened, right? Unfortunately, this happened, and here's the sources for that, okay? And that is why we end up in the situation that we end up in, right? It could be. All right. So, which one is which one? We just look at the structure that I've put together. So I said that there are 4 sections. 1 to 6, that is about Zerubbabel, and then 7 to 10, that is on Ezra himself. Nehemiah 1 to 7, that's about Nehemiah, and then Nehemiah 8 to 13 is Ezra and Nehemiah, but 13 is kind of like a conclusion. So I divided that into 2 main sections, right? 2 main sections. And the main section of the left side of the 2 main sections is from Ezra 1 to Nehemiah 7. And there are about 3 different topics. And in these 3 different topics, there are 3 movements. There are 3 movements. Let me show the camera. So there are 3 different topics: temple, Torah, and the wall. And in each of these topics, there are 3 movements: return, revival, and then an opposition. And what is the resolution to the opposition? Right. So there's a return to build the temple, which results in some kind of a revival. But then they are met with opposition. And how did they resolve the opposition? And then we come to the next big item on the law, on the Torah. So somebody made a return. In this case, Zerubbabel made a return to build the temple. Here, Ezra made the return to build, to teach the Torah. And then as a result of his teaching, it brought in a revival. Okay. And then there are some opposition to that revival. And how did that come to resolution? And then we have the third topic on the wall of Jerusalem, and Nehemiah makes a return to build the wall, and that results in the revival. And there's some opposition, and what's the resolution to that? Does that make sense? Okay, 3 topics, and each topic has 3 movements, and this whole thing we know is a unit because Ezra chapter 2 is exactly the same as Nehemiah chapter 7, which is the name list. All right, you go to Ezra chapter 2, you will see a name list. You see a set of names there? Okay, the number of, like, verse 2, right? The number of men of the people of Israel, the son of Parosh, etc. And then you go to Nehemiah chapter 7, verse 7. The number of the men of the people of Israel, the son of Parosh, 2172, the son of Shephatiah, 372. And you compare that with Ezra chapter 2, is exactly the same name list. Cool? All right. So these 2 name lists kind of forms an inclusio of the returns. Right? Start with the name list, end with the name list. All right. This is the story of the returns, the 3 returns. Return to do the temple, return to teach the Torah, return to build the wall. Represented by Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Cool? That's the structure. All right. So then, remember, what was the prophetic expectation? The prophetic expectation is return to Jerusalem, rebuild the temple, return of the Lord to the temple, the nations come to worship the Lord and the Messiah. All right. So that is what the prophets say is going to happen when we return to Jerusalem. Okay. And so now we have returned to Jerusalem. Some years later, some years after we have returned to Jerusalem, some guy is writing to talk about our history of the returns against the prophetic expectation. Did we achieve what the prophets say is going to happen? Does that make sense? Right? Because you have to know that the people know what the prophets say and about what happens after we come back. This is what they say is going to happen after we come back. And now there is a need for accounting for whether we have achieved the goals, okay, the outcomes that the prophets have foresaw. All right. That is his goal. Ezra has his own goals. Nehemiah has his own goals. It is in their memoirs, in their respective memoirs. But the goal of the author is to provide an account as to whether we have accomplished, we have attained to the prophetic expectation through the various movements through the various cycles of the temple, of the Torah, of the wall, with the various returns, the mini revivals it produces, it sparks, and then some opposition to it, and how did we resolve it? So that is a story of the return, and then after that we have some kind of epilogue from Nehemiah 8 to 13. Cool? Right. So we begin with the first return, that is Zerubbabel. All right. Zerubbabel returned by the order of King Cyrus. King Cyrus make a decree to command any Jew who wants to return to Jerusalem, they could return. And so Zerubbabel brought a group of people, their names are in the name list. And when you look at the name list, there are thousands of them. But if you look closer, like, no, a nation is not just this many thousands, right? That means a minority of the Jewish people return. Most of them remain outside of the land. So they were in Babylon, they didn't come back. Do you see why they wouldn't come back? Huh? Hardship in Jerusalem, that's one, yeah. They've established themselves in Babylon, yeah. 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 That's true. For example, let's just say there is now a major drive to Balik China. Okay, or Balik India, right? But Balik, would you want to go? Why not? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There have been divergence, right? And then I don't think, yeah, my grandfather came from Guangzhou. My dad was raised in Ipoh, right? And but I'm here, you know what I mean? So that's that. So I'm much closer to Ipoh. I'm of course PJ, right? That's where I am, right? I was born in University Hospital. Okay, so PJ, Supataling Primary School, Bukit Bintang Secondary School. This is where I'm at, right? I have maybe a closer affinity to Ipoh than to Kuantan, I guess, right? Because that's where my dad hails from, and then Guangzhou, Hong Kong. My grandfather spent some years in Hong Kong. Then spent some, and then grew up in. I've been to his village. In his village, all of them, their surname is Fong. Yeah. All right. So that is that. I've been there. They said, "Oh, this is the house. That's where the sister." And then this is the land. There's one plot of land that was reserved for me because I'm Zhong Ji Dixin. I'm the elder son of the elder son, right? So that kind of a thing. All right, but affinity, there's nothing there for me in that. So only those super Gian people are super China people, right? They want to say, okay, let's balik China or something, right? Okay, but for the majority of us, not like that. So the super Gian Jews, right? They would make this trip with Zerubbabel to a destroyed city. I mean, I have my business here, my family is here, my kids is school. Well, kids are schooling here. I'm going back to the wilderness. Now Balik China maybe still okay, but back in the 90s, siapa mau Balik China? You go back to nothing, right? So Zerubbabel. And there is a revival. The revival was the rebuilding of the temple, right? They rebuilt the temple, but they rebuilt the temple. Some laughed with joy, some cried and wailed in sadness. So until people couldn't figure out, are they actually crying or are they laughing? Why? Because, right, the temple they built was kind of not at the same grandeur with the one Solomon built, right? Solomon, when he built it, he has like, he spare no expenses. It's King Solomon. He can build whatever he wants, right? They come back with some provisions by by King Cyrus, right? They're on a tight budget, so they built a budget version, economic version of the temple. So those who are older, who in their youth have seen the temple in its its glory. Now when they come back, they see this thing. They say, "Yeah, this is substandard." So that is one, but it did spark a revival. You read Haggai, you read Zechariah, right? It did spark some kind of a mini revival. And then they were met with opposition. And the opposition was that they will reject the people of the land. The people of the land. That the two groups of people that you can consider them as people of the land. Now, what happened when the Jews were exiled? Did that land kind of like become what, wilderness? Did nature claim back the land, or did it not happen, right? Or what happened? What happened was that when they exiled mostly the elites. All right. They left behind the vine dressers, right? They left behind the farmers, right? To grow crops for the empire, you see? So that when Babylon wants to invade Egypt, let's just say, when they come down, that there's provision. They don't have to, you know what I mean? They don't have to ferry everything from Babylon, right? So they have to bring provisions right? The train, so they can have local provisions, right? So they left the poorest of the poor, who are illiterate, who can't do a rebellion, who can't organize a rebellion anyways. So those were actually their compatriots from 50 years back. You know what I mean? Those were their compatriots from 50 years back. You got exiled. But there's still a lot of people who remain behind. There's also another group called the people of the land, whereby these are guys who were brought in by the Assyrians. The Assyrians depopulated northern Israel and then brought in people from other places. And when they brought in from other places, they suffered a lot. They suffered a lot, right? There were a lot of disaster. And they say, why are we experiencing so much disaster? It's because we didn't honor the God of the land. And they ask, who's the God of the land? And the God of the land is Yahweh, right? So then we need to, worship Yahweh. And they hired some Levites to teach them the how to worship Yahweh. But they are not Israelites, ethnic Israelites. They're people brought from outside, and they also worship other things. Now, those who left behind, were there like Yahweh exclusivists that worship Yahweh and Yahweh alone? No. That's why people got exiled in the first place. That means the religion of the land has always been syncretic. Syncretic means it's always been a mixture. So, Judah, right? They were having that kind of religion that is syncretized with Baal worship, syncretized with Asherah, syncretized with all kinds of things, together with Yahweh worship. That we even found statues and inscriptions of a masculine figure and a feminine figure, and the inscription down there says Yahweh and his escort, Asherah. So Yahweh is the emperor and Asherah is the empress. That kind of a thing of the god and goddesses of heaven. So it's a very mixed religion. And so they got exiled. But those who left behind maintained that religion. Some of them even got exiled to Egypt, right? Because they ran away. They were brought to Babylon as the thing was burning down to the ground. A group of them ran away to Egypt, to a place called Elephantine in Egypt. And we know that because we have letters that is preserved for us from them. There they built a temple in Elephantine. Although Deuteronomy says that you should only build a temple in the place where God has put his name. And that is Jerusalem. They don't care. We already have temples in Bethel. We have temple in Dan anyway. Why not here in Elephantine? And then they worship all kinds of things, including Yahweh, a Jewish community, right? So the community that is like Yahweh exclusivist, that has become Yahweh exclusivist, are actually the Babylonian Jews. You know what I mean? That's where Ezekiel ministered. That's where you read the story of the book of Daniel, right? That is where you read about the story of Daniel, right? Even in Babylon itself, it didn't start off that way, because there have always been syncretistic in their religion. So when King Nebuchadnezzar raised his statue, right, everybody except three bowed down. The Jews are down to three Yahweh exclusivists, right? And it's perhaps, maybe I'm speculating, due to that miracle of them not being consumed by the flames, but consumed by the furnace, that created a spiritual awakening in Babylon. And then, all right, from now on, we need to be Yahweh exclusivists. And they start collecting the stories of Israel, and the teachings of Moses and all of that, and compiled into the Torah, into the Pentateuch. You see what I mean? And so they brought the Pentateuch back. Not yet. Zerubbabel he didn't. Ezra is going to come back with the Torah. You see? So actually, what is going on in Jerusalem is that Jerusalem has become a colony of the Babylonian Jews. That means the HQ was not Jerusalem. The HQ was Babylon. And you can see this clearly because every time there is a new caravan that comes back from Babylon, that's the leader. You know what I mean? Zerubbabel comes back from Babylon. Zerubbabel is the leader of the whole community in Jerusalem. Ezra comes back from Babylon. Then Ezra is the leader of the Jerusalem community, right? Nehemiah comes back from Babylon. Then Nehemiah is the leader. So the leadership, right, is actually from Babylon, because that's where they codified the religion. You know what I mean? And they brought that back to. And so what happened is that when the Jews want to rebuild the temple, then the people of the land, right, whether those were their uncles or cousins from 50 years ago, right, or it is the people that Assyrians brought back that also worships Yahweh in some ways, when they hear that these Babylonian returnees, right, these Babylonian Jews have returned, is rebuilding the temple, they say that we want to build together with you. We also worship Yahweh. Right? So now there's a decision to make. On the one hand, yeah, these guys, we want to ally with them. And actually, this is my second cousin. Okay. But his name is not in the list. That's why the list is very important. So they said that only those who return from Babylon are true Jews. I don't care whether you are my grandfather's brother that didn't get exiled. As long as you didn't come back from Jerusalem, I consider you as the people of the land, compromised. If not ethnically, at least religiously. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, if we now have a group of right, my new wave of migrants, let's just say migration from Guangzhou, right, to come over here from my little town of Punyu and my little, okay, if it really come from my village, my grandfather's village of Zhok Liu, then we're probably gonna make connections. But if they are just from Guangzhou in general, they come back, right? They will be creating a community of people from Guangzhou. They'll be closer to people from Shanghai than from us. Does that make sense? Right? Because we are Malaysians. So although ethnically the same, but we are culturally, the way we think of it is very different already. So they only consider those who come the final wave, this recent wave from China, to be that pure community, right? The pure community. Whereas we are yeah, the people, Hong Kong people, they can't differentiate. They call us Malays. Yeah, they call us Malays. Yeah. So they don't understand that. So when this group of Babylonian Jews come back with their very Ezekiel type teaching, right? Torah, then these people want to, so what do we do? There's a decision to make. The decision they make was that they rejected the people of the land to jointly build the temple. Is that good? Is that bad? It doesn't say. The story, the narrator doesn't say. The narrator just leave it there for you to think about it. Naturally, Christians, this is the word of the Lord, what they did must be right. Now, we can see the logic of why they did that, but is that completely right? Right? The author doesn't say. It is for discussion. It's for us to discuss. So, you get the idea now? So that's the first cycle. The second cycle, Ezra comes back with the Torah. This time under King Artaxerxes. They always tell us which Persian king, right, that commissioned the return. So Ezra comes back, and Ezra was a scribe. That means he's the guy who copies the Torah. In fact, he may even have a hand in completing the Torah. You know what I mean? Because it is the scribes, the rabbis in Babylon that compiled the final form, Torah in the final form. So Ezra brought back the final form, nowadays final form is not very popular anymore, the term, because what do you mean by final form? The canonical form, right? The form that is found in our Bible, right? He brought that back from Babylon and he reads it. And people were hearing it like as though they were hearing it for the first time. And my interpretation is that, yeah, they were hearing it for the first time. The full, I mean, they maybe have the 10 Commandments in mind. Everybody has heard of something, but how many people have actually, really listen through the whole of the Torah? Because remember, religion has always been very folk. There's high religion, there's literary religion, and there is the folk religion. You know what I mean? I mean, I grew up Taoist, right? I mean, my parents, they never read Tao Te Ching, the what is it called? The Tao Te Ching, the book of the Tao, right? And I only read it as an adult when I'm already a Christian, right? To look at comparative religion. So there's a Taoism as practiced by the people, right? That is based on what the grandmother say. That's based on what the Taoist master say. That's based on what this fellow say, that fellow say, the village elder say. Those kind of things, right? Okay. But didn't actually really go and read Tao Te Ching, that kind of thing. So likewise, most people were illiterate as well. And so they're hearing it for the first time, what Ezra is reading. And so that sparks a revival of offerings for the temple. And there is the opposition. So when Ezra came back, he saw that the Babylonian returnees from the previous return, from Zerubbabel's return, right, have intermarried with the people of the land, with the local women. Well, obviously, they would do that, right? So, and Ezra doesn't like that. So Ezra forced the returnees to divorce the local wives and put away the children. And that's how that story ends. But I can see it's the same motivation. It's the same motivation. We want to keep it pure. We want to keep the holy seed. The Babylonian Judaism. Because we fear that these would dilute our identity. This would dilute our religion. This would reintroduce syncretism back into what we have tried to purify in Babylon. You read the Brethren Church history, you can see a lot of parallels. Okay, trying to keep it pure, right? So everyone else is suspect. Right? That kind of thing. You understand the motivation, but is it right? The narrator doesn't say. What do you think? Do you think God approves that they divorce their wives? Yes. Okay, now they are married, then what happens? So how now? Let me give you a scenario. Okay. 2 Christians went through a divorce. We counseled them, all right? There's no adultery, all right? We counseled them. We said, don't do it. They got a divorce. Then they, of course, also left the church, right? And lead their lives. So this man, let's just say the man, right, marries another woman. We say that's causing them to commit adultery, right? According to the teaching of Jesus. You see, you know what I'm saying? Okay. Now he comes back to church after 20 years, okay, with his second wife. The first wife is still alive. What do you recommend? Divorce his second wife because it's adultery and go back to the first wife? It's complicated. 100% you wouldn't recommend that. You recommend staying with this current wife. Perhaps even if the first wife is open to reconciliation. You say, no, I think that's over. Now you got a whole new family here. Right? It's complicated. It's not so black and white. You see? So some things you can't just, what's the legal term? To put back to original restitution. Is it restitution to reverse the contract back to its what before the contract was made, because the contract was not done illegal. Well, there's something, right? So restitution, yeah. There are also, all right. So force the returnees to divorce local women. CI says online, Ruth was not a Jew. Huh? Interesting, huh? Marrying for should Boaz divorce Ruth? Okay. Did you even try converting these people of the land to the Babylonian Jewish faith? Right? Did you even try evangelism, maybe? So there are a lot of questions, The narrator just leave it unresolved. So then we have a third cycle. We have, yep. So the more you read, the more you see certain pattern coming up. Oh, Jacob says, yeah, Rahab was also not a Jew, not a Jewess, but also became an ancestor of Jesus. Shomei helps us, our professor, restitutio ad integrum, restoration to original condition, right? You have to trust a contract law lecturer to tell us that. Yeah. So you can do that with marriage and then with children, all of that. So Ezra was trying to do that, right? And then what about the children? Well, the children go with the mothers because they are compromised too. We need to preserve the holy seed. So the mention the holy seed is D. That means the holy DNA become very critical. All right, comes Nehemiah, came to be governor of Nehemiah, and he comes around and said that we need to build a wall, because without a wall you can't defend yourself. Without a wall, what are you? But then building a wall is a big problem. Rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem, and the Samaritans came and said, this is the northerners came. Hey, you can't build a wall, or we can work together. And Nehemiah found that the chief priest, right? The chief priest has already made marriage alliance with the Samaritans to strengthen the political ties, right? That's how you do it. They've already intermarried with the Samaritans. So the Samaritans says, we are part of this. And then Nehemiah said, you have no part in this. This is our city. And so the Samaritans went to complain to the king and said that, whoa, you know what these people are doing? They're building the wall to their city. All right. Why did the Babylonians tear down the city, tear down the wall in the first place? So that you could not defend yourself, right? If you could defend yourself, then you can start a rebellion. What if now they rebuild the wall, they start an army, and then how is Persia going to reimpose their authority in Jerusalem? You have to fight a bloody battle again. Of course, you will win because you are the Persians. The Jews will lose, but then at what cost, right? So clearly, the Samaritan says that the Jews want to rebuild the wall is in order to declare independence. From the Persians. Don't forget, they are not their own country yet. You know, they are not an independent nation yet. They are under the Persian Empire. And the idea is that you don't have a wall. If you don't have a wall, then you can't actually do much of it's very easy to quash whatever rebellion that you want to do. But if you build a wall, then we have to do siege warfare, then we have to do a lot of kind of things, right, in order to do that. So As you can see, the returns, there's a revival, successful revivals, but also a bit partial, right? For example, the temple was small, all right. And then there is the opposition, and all the opposition, the theme is that what do we do with the people of the land? What do we do with the non-returnees? With people who cannot trace their genealogy back to the list. There's the list. Only those lists are Jews. If you cannot trace yourself back to the list, okay, even though you claim, dude, your grandfather and my grandfather, your grandfather was exiled, my grandfather wasn't exiled, then what happened, right? Okay, cannot. You need to be part of that list. And those who couldn't, those who said that they are part of the list but couldn't prove it, we put into a ragu box, right? That is the you vote, that is the ragu box. That box until the Messiah come or somebody come, all right? There's the authority to say whether you are part of us or not. Yeah, even though we know that he's my neighbor in Babylon, if you couldn't name who's your father, who's your grandfather, who's your great grandfather who was exiled, you're not part of us. Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, when yeah. Register their names. Yeah. So you need to register your name. If you didn't register your name, okay, then you party lah. Then you are stateless. In their mind, you're not part of us. Yeah. Holy seed. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You need to have come. Yeah, you must be a returnee. So there are some inkling that they allow some of that, but by and large, not really. Yeah, you have to be part of us. So that's the question. That's the question. That is what the narrator is trying to say. Trying to ask. It's a conversation. He has a position, but he wants to make it a conversation. That's how biblical authors do things. Biblical authors, unless you're Paul or something, is usually not so dictative. All right, it's like he kind of have a position, but he put it in such a way that results. He wants his community to talk about it. All right, he wants his readers to his community. He wants the Jews to talk about it. Yeah. All right. So Nehemiah 8-12. So they rebuilt everything, and then now there is some kind of flashback or whatever. And so now we have the reading of the covenant. Ezra and Nehemiah come together to read the Torah. All right. And then so three themes. There's the reading of the Torah, as though they're hearing it for the first time. So if it's written in like as though they're hearing it for the first time, I take it that they were hearing it for the first time. All right, in its entirety at least. And so that results in repentance. Now we will really be good Jews. Okay, our forefathers messed up. All right, but by God's grace, they recounted the whole Israel history. All right, though we have rebelled against God, yet the Lord brought us back here. So therefore from now on, we must be really, really super faithful to God, right? So that's the repentance. And then it talks about settlement, who lives here, who lives where. It's boring reading for us, unless your grandfather's name is in it, then you have a piece of land. Okay, so there's that. There's a covenant that's very good. And then comes chapter 13. There's regression about the temple, right? So the first topic is the temple, all right? So Nehemiah came back from his travels. he was recalled back to Babylon. All right. And then he came back again for a second time. And what did he see? So now in this part of the Nehemiah memoir, this is what he saw. He saw the temple. There is this place that was supposed to be dedicated for offerings, to store the offerings, okay, has been turned into a storeroom. Right? And has been turned into an apartment. Have been turned into apartment for a Samaritan who is allied to the chief priest by marriage. Okay. Why is that place emptied out? Because there's no offering. Right? Because people weren't paying the tithes. So the Levites, who are responsible for working in the temple, they ran out of supply. So they have to go back to the fields to work full-time jobs, to work their fields. So nobody is working in the temple. The choir, everything got disbanded. Right? So he returned. So the first topic was temple regressed. Okay. Then the second one is about the Torah. The third one is about the wall. So the Torah and the wall comes together. The Torah primarily about the Sabbath. The Sabbath was broken. All right. Because the guys who were taking care of the wall, the gates of the wall, like just let them in on Sabbath. So they set up Pasar Malam on Sabbath. Then like, what's the point of the gates? What's the point of the wall? All right. The wall is broken. Not physically broken, but spiritually broken, because the gatekeepers in cahoots with the temple authorities just allow that to happen. So he shuts that down. And then the third thing, what has all the opposition and resolution been about? About the people of the land. And so what did Nehemiah find? Nehemiah find that there's more intermarriage, especially among the elites. Although Ezra has made them divorce, apparently it's just lip service. All right. That's not what the people want. You just enforce it from on high. Right. And the moment Nehemiah was not there, they returned back to their intermarriage. And so that's how the story ends. The story ends with Nehemiah chasing this guy down the street, pulling his hair out. God, please remember the good things I've done. Right. So that is how the book of Nehemiah ends. So what do you think? Let's compare what actually happened, the accounting of what actually happened, with the prophetic expectation. Return to Jerusalem, yes. Rebuild the temple, kinda, right? The return of the Lord to the temple, no. The nations come to worship God, no. You kick them out. You kick the nations out. You didn't even attempt to educate the nations. How about educating the nations? How about preaching to them? The Messiah, nowhere to be found. We don't have the Messiah. We have a governor, Nehemiah, under the King of Kings. Who is the King of Kings? Artaxerxes. So if I were to give a title to the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, I would call it The Revival That Never Was. The revival that never was. And therefore, there is a need for a new revival. Of course, if Ezra and Nehemiah worked, if those revival that returning, those and all the fulfillments, then there's no need for Jesus, right? There's no need, the New Testament don't need. We close with Ezra and Nehemiah. Right? There's no need for further revival. So Ezra and Nehemiah, what the author, in my opinion, right, is saying is that, yeah, there's all this thing happening. We tried to do these revivals, tak jadi. Tak jadi. So there is a need for a new revival. There is a need to bring the prophetic expectation to reality. And this Ezra and Nehemiah, good, well-intentioned. They're great people. Ezra, great. Zerubbabel, fantastic. Ezra, fantastic. Nehemiah, okay. No matter how great your intentions are, without the Messiah, without the Lord returning to the temple, it just falls short. That's what the book of Ezra and Nehemiah is about. Yeah, only two parts were fulfilled. Return to Jerusalem. Return to Jerusalem also partial. Not everyone returned. Only a minority returned. The rebuilding of temple also kinda is it's a substandard temple, not the Solomon. No, not that level. Yeah, the Lord didn't come back. Yeah, yeah. The dimensions. The temple that wasn't given the yeah. In First Kings, there is some measurement of the temple, but not as detailed as specific. I guess the reason is because there is a temple. So just look at it, I guess. But the tabernacle you need to describe in detail because the tabernacle no longer exists, I suppose. I'm not sure the specific reason. Second temple, I have no idea. No, because the temple that Jesus saw was the temple that was done by Herod the Great. After that, yeah, cool. Ken. All right. Before we take a break, Kelvin is back. So Kelvin, can we take a photo now? All right. So now very quickly, we go through the book of Esther. Now the book of Esther, um, I'm sure you know the story of the book of Esther already. If not, it's very easy reading. Just 10 short chapters of the book of Esther. And this structure is adapted from John Levinson in his very influential, quite small commentary, but very influential in the OTL, Old Testament Library, published in 1997. And it is a chiastic structure. There's a big chiasm, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then reverses back to G prime, F prime, E prime, D prime, C prime, B prime, A prime. So on the outer layer, there is the greatness of Aha. I always say the way that it's written in the Hebrew, Ahasuerus. So, but Ahasuerus, okay, or in your NIV, it may say King Xerxes. The Hebrew is Ahasuerus, but identity why he is King Xerxes, the Great. Okay, King Xerxes the Great. So it is mirrored by the greatness of Ahasuerus and Mordecai in chapter 10. And then there is the two banquets of the Persians. And then there's two banquets of the Jews mirrored by. So it starts with two banquets of the Persians. The king hosts a banquet, and then the queen also hosts a banquet. And or rather, the king hosts a banquet for his leaders and then also for the people as well. Okay, so there's two banquets that mirrored by the two banquets of the Jews. And then chapter 2, we have Esther identifying as a Gentile, and then at the end, Esther identifies the Jew, which is primarily what the story is about, right? First, Esther hides her identity, and then Esther reveals her identity, right? And then there's an elevation of Haman, and then the bad guy, and then mirrored by the elevation of Mordecai, the good guy, right? That's the kind of thing. E, there is the anti-Jewish edict to kill all the Jews. And then there is mirrored by E prime, there's a pro-Jewish edict, right? And then there is the fateful exchange between Mordecai and Esther. And then there's a fateful, where Mordecai tells Esther, hey, it may be for this particular moment that you have been given, you're placed in the position that you are. But if you don't do anything about it, right? If you don't come forward, then salvation will come for the Jews from a different place, right? That kind of thing. And there is, and that exchange between Mordecai and Esther puts Esther into motion, right? To get things done, and to save the Jews. And then there is a mirrored by a fateful exchange between Ahasuerus and Esther that resulted in the death of Haman, right? And there's a lot of makan in this book, banquet, right? So there's the first banquet of the king, queen, and Haman, mirrored by a second banquet of the king, queen, and Haman. And then in the middle is this very funny story of royal procession. I'll just go through the story one by one. So it starts off with King Ahasuerus, who is the king over 127 provinces that stretches from one end to the other end, really huge empire. And then he holds this banquet, and this banquet is like everything made of gold. It's like, just free flow for months. For half a year. It's a banquet of half a year. Historically, actually, King Xerxes was preparing to invade Greece. Okay, and we got to know the 300, the Thermopylae and all of that, right? So King Leonidas, right? That story, the 300. So he was preparing to. So what he does is that he gets all his generals and military leaders, all the leaders, civilian princes, all together to actually come up with a strategy to invade. So that took half a year. It's a half a year retreat to prepare for the invasion of Greece. But then for the outsider looking every day, they just makan. Of course, at daytime they discuss, and then nighttime then they have their party, right? The banquet. So that lasted for half a year. But from the observer, it's just the makan, right? So it just shows the opulence. The point is the opulence of King Ahasuerus in the two banquets. And then King Ahasuerus at some point drunk say, hey, get the queen to come here and present her to the people. She refused. And that is a big slap in the face of the king, because it's like, dude, you're the king of the empire. You can't even compel your queen to come. And so he's like, what should I do? What should I do? And then he said he asked his ministers, what should I do? And this is a theme in the book of Esther. Like this king, right? He is so passive. He doesn't have any ideas of his own. All right. He only take counsel. He only do what his counselors say. All right. So his counselors say, we need to make a decree in all the empire that the husband must be the head of the household. That wives must listen to their husbands, because if the word goes out that the queen disobeys the king, then the whole empire will, then all our wives would stop listening to us. It's so pathetic.
King Caesar is
right, that you need to have a decree to compel wives to submit to their husbands. It's just ridiculous, right? So on the one hand, there's the opulence. On the other hand, they expose the underbelly of the empire. But the empire is very efficient. Wow, then the postal services. It's so very impressive how the postal services is able to write the script, translate into all the local languages of the 127 provinces and get it all, and then read out each in the own script. Very, very. So it's a very great, well-oiled machinery that is the empire.
So much work.
Is it a good empire? Is it a bad empire? It's an empire, but it's quite benevolent in a lot of ways. All right, quite an enlightened empire, but just that it's very comical as well. And then, so he divorces as Vashti, the queen. And after some time, basically after he lost the war, he came back. He was sad. The war is not mentioned in the book, but historically we can link it up. All right, he comes back, and then he remembered Vashti. He gets lonely, and then all his ministers say, what should we do? What should we do? I've got an idea. Let's have a beauty contest. Let's gather all the fair damsels, all right, all throughout the 127 provinces, and bring them to Susa, bring them to the citadel, all right, and then let the king choose a new queen, all right, and so that is the end of that part. And so then introduce, there is this Jew, all right, his name was Mordecai. He's called Mordecai the Jew. Super ironic, because Mordecai, this name is a Babylonian name. Mordecai the Jew, Mordecai comes from Marduk, which is the god of the Babylonians. So he's literally Marduk, Mordecai, and he has a niece by the name of Esther, right? Which is also a Babylonian name. Her name Ishtar, which is the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, right? So we have Marduk and Ishtar,
You mean
and
Esther
they
is
are
not a Christian name?
Jewish. And then locate for you what happened. What happened was that
Yeah, Esther is not a Jewish
they
name.
were exiled from
Then why do people name
Jerusalem
Esther?
to Babylon. So her name was Hadassah. Hadassah means myrtle, is a beautiful Jewish girl name, Hadassah. All right. But she doesn't go by the name Hadassah, her ethnic name. She goes by her Babylonian name, Esther. Esther. And
Yeah,
Mordecai,
so
we don't
why
even
do-
know his
but
Jewish
does
name,
that
but
mean
he's
something
Mordecai the Jew. Mordecai the Jew is so ironic, and myself call me Stephen the Chinese.
Hebrew or
Stephen the Chinese, right? That makes no sense,
But that's
right?
in
But
Hebrew.
but in a sense, yeah, that's
Hebrew
true.
the other way, Hadassah is
Why?
for
So the question is
name.
why,
Esther is
right?
therefore
So the reader asks why.
foreign name. What you call a Gentile name.
Wait a minute, this is King what? King Xerxes, way after King Cyrus, way after all the returns, all right? It's after the Zerubbabel return, it's after the Ezra return, it's after the Nehemiah return. Okay, so why didn't you guys return? The opportunity was there. Not only did you not return from Babylon, that means journey from Babylon westward to Jerusalem, you went further east into Persia. So you were all stuck in Babylon, right? You're all stuck in Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar, right? All stuck in Babylon. And then when Xerxes says, you all can leave, go back to where you come from, right? Oh, we can leave, let's leave further east. So the question is, are these faithful Jews? You get it? Are these faithful Jews? This is the one book in the Bible that doesn't even mention God or prayer. Or in the places where prayer and God ought to be mentioned, the author seems to bend over backward to suppress. Right? If you do not come forward to help us, right, then deliverance will come for the Jews from
somewhere else.
Another place. Right? You know, how does a Jew even write that, right? Obviously, you're going to write God. I'm not going to write God. I'm going to suppress that. I'm going to from another place. Right? And then, oh no, I'm going to meet the king. I'm going to meet the king. But if I go into the king without being invited, without being called, then it's death penalty unless somehow he accepts that by extending his scepter to me. So I need to go in to talk to the king. It's like, please, Mordecai, please fast. Esther asked Mordecai, please fast. You need to fast for 3 days. Why not say pray? Suppress. So we suppress all kinds of religious faithfulness, all right? So incidentally, there are two different versions. There are another two different versions of the book of Esther. Yeah, there's one version of the book of Esther that's in our Bible. There's a Hebrew version. There are two Greek versions. One is a Septuagint, which is supposed to be a translation of the Hebrew. It is 6 paragraphs longer. Actually, it's more than 6 paragraphs longer. It's just longer, 30% longer or something like that. All right, and those 30% longer is about Mordecai starting his sort of vision. There's a dragon and there's a whatever, right? And then they battled it out. And then God was telling him something. And then he said, blessed be the Lord, right? Something like that, all right? And then before Esther went to see the king, she prays. She prayed, Father, so she prayed, God, you know, it is because we have been unfaithful. You have promised the land to Abraham, but then that's why we end up in exile. But you know, although I am married to the king, but then I never ate any of the food. I'm like Daniel never ate it. Do you believe that? Okay, so it seems that there's these additions to the book of Esther that somebody's not happy, I suppose, with a godless Esther. So these additions that's just full of prayer and faithfulness and covenant and all of that. There's another third version called the Alpha text. There is a much shorter version that also talk about God, and that looked like an older version of the book of Esther. It seems like that Alpha text we call it alpha text because that looks like a really older version of the story of Esther, which our biblical author, right, kind of took that story from which this is descended, all right, and blocked out all mention of God. That's the billion-dollar question, and that is what my postgraduate research is all about, which is about why don't you talk about God in the book of Esther? All right, we'll get to that. So Esther was selected as queen, as the new queen after this tedious process of selection. And then there is also about the fate of these women that you just taken for granted that, well, you just become concubines, and then if the king never calls you again, then you stay in the house of the concubines for the rest of your life, right? That is that, okay? So Esther was elevated as queen, but and then what happened was that Mordecai, this as an aside, Mordecai at one point heard that there was an attempt on the king's life by two eunuchs. Well, what motivation does eunuchs have to murder, to assassinate the king? I guess eunuchs have plenty of motivations to assassinate the king. So Mordecai heard about it, told Esther, and Esther told the king and thwarted the plot and sentenced them to death. And Mordecai's name was noted in the king's diary, all right, in the annals, all right, that Mordecai did this service to the king. But unfortunately, someone else became prime minister, Haman the Agagite. Haman the Agagite became prime minister, and this guy, he is a bad guy, right? And what happened was that everyone who meets Haman must bow down to Haman, but Mordecai the Jew refuses to bow down to Haman the Agagite. And why? Because he's a Jew. Why should a Jew bow down to Haman the Agagite? We're not told. All right. And then and when Haman was like, saw that he's a very egoistical guy, he says, I'm so angry with this. That's because he's Mordecai the Jew. These Jewish people, they are terrible people. We need to get rid of them. All right. So he plotted and he threw dice, okay, threw lots, and see when is a good time to exterminate the Jews, right? He did to augur with the gods, right, to tell him when to do that. And it is something like this. He was doing this thing in January, and the lots fell, the dice, all right, fall on December. So he's doing it in January, but the best time to do it is in December, right? So this is what's going on. Why is it like the end of the year? Nonetheless, Haman went to see the king and said, there is a group of people. There is a group of people, right, that's anti the emperor, right? It's anti the king, and they cause problem wherever they go. We need to exterminate them. Then the king said, want to exterminate them, lah. He always listens to the advice of his ministers. Right? Then they had a party. So they put out this anti-Jewish edict, and all Susa and the 127 provinces were thrown into chaos. And when Mordecai heard the news, he was mourning, tearing his clothes, mourning, putting ashes on his head. And then when Esther heard about it, Esther asked, give Haman some proper clothes, fit him, what's going on, right? That means she didn't even know. She didn't even know. She was so insulated, right? She didn't even know what's going on in the palace. And so Mordecai tells Esther that you need to go and speak to the king. Then Esther says, I can't go and speak to the king because the king hasn't called me for a month now, right? And there's a law, and if you go into the king uninvited, he doesn't extend his scepter, then you die, right? Then Mordecai says, hey, you may think that you will be safe, all right? No, you won't be safe. Okay? You and your father's house will be. But as for the Jews, even if you don't step up, then deliverance will come from another place. And then when Esther hears that, Esther says, okay, I'll do it. But please fast. So please proclaim a fast. So they fasted. And then Esther went in to see the king. And then the king says, what do you want? And then Esther says, can I have a banquet? All right, can I have a banquet between you, me, and Haman? Then sure. So Haman was very happy because Haman was like, wow, you know what? Of the whole empire, the king, the queen, and me. All right. So he walks out from palace very happy, and then he saw Mordecai standing there, never bowed down. He went home and he says, what is the use of me achieving all these things? All right. But that guy, all right, Mordecai, all right, I'm not going to exterminate him anyways. No, I'm not going to wait until December to exterminate him. Then someone say, why don't you put this super high pole, right? And then you get the king to impale him on that pole, like that, Mordecai on the pole. Then so that's a good idea. That's a good idea. But interestingly, during the banquet, the king asked Esther, so what do you want? Why did you ask us to just makan? What is it that you want? Up to half my kingdom I'll give to you. All right. And then she's like, she bottled up. She bottled up. She says, let's have another banquet tomorrow. All right. She couldn't pull the trigger. All right. She was scared. And so because she bottled up, so therefore, Haman could concoct this plot to have Mordecai killed. You know, because Esther bottled up, right? So Mordecai's life was in danger. So Mordecai go and see the king early in the morning, like while it was still dark. But on that same day, the king was having, what is it? He couldn't sleep. Insomnia. I almost said amnesia. Yes, insomnia. So it's insomnia. And he says, I can't sleep. He got his people. Can you read my diary? And then they read. And they read to the part where Mordecai did the service for the king. Oh, Mordecai saved my life. What did we reward him with him? We didn't reward him with anything. What? We didn't reward him with anything. So, is there any of my ministers up here this early in the morning? Oh, Haman is here. Haman is here to tell the king to go and hang Mordecai on the pole. So he comes in. The king says, hey, Haman, you know if somebody, right, did some major service to the king and the king wants to reward such a guy, what should the king do for him? And then Haman, must be me lah. Right? So Haman goes for the maximum. Right? What I would do, if I were you, I will put royal robes on him. All right? I will dress him like the king. And I put him on the king's horse. And I will parade him around the city center. All right? And to say that, such will be done for someone who honors the king. So what is he asking for? He wants to be a co-regent. He wants to be a regent, co-regent with the king, right? So that is what he hopes his reward for. The king said, good idea. Do that for Mordecai. So, dutifully, Haman took Mordecai from the gates of the city, put him on the horse, put the royal robes on him, and paraded him around, and he ran home bursting in tears, right? And then his wife and his wise men told Haman something cryptic. Oh, if Mordecai is really a Jew from the Jewish people, then you will not be able to stand against him. Huh? Why talk like that? Why not talk about? Obviously, it's about God. What's so great about being a Jew, right? But then suppress that as well. So then, okay. So while Haman was thinking about this thing, the queen's people, right, came and said, Haman, it's time for the banquet. So Haman went to the banquet. At the banquet, the king says, what do you really want? And Esther this time says, you know, there is this evil person who wants to exterminate my people. They say, who is that? And then she said, it's Haman. And the king was so upset, he didn't know what to do. He jammed, all right? So he went off to take a walk in his garden. And then Haman was like, quickly ran to Esther and pleaded very tearfully and forcefully with her, please don't do that, don't do this, don't do this. So when the king came back, the king thought that Haman was trying to assault his wife, right? Trying to do a sexual assault on his wife. He said, what? So he has Haman killed, not even for the right reason, not even for the actual reason. And then he says, what? How can Haman do something like this? And then one of the guards, right, say, you know what? Haman built this super tall pole, all right, to kill Mordecai. Mordecai, the guy who saved my life, all right, have him hung up the pole, all right? And so that's how Haman died. But the problem is, there was this edict, and the edict of the king cannot be changed according to the law, right? It cannot be changed. It is immutable. So you cannot rescind that law. So in December, there's going to be this mass murder, right? Mass culling of the Jews. So how? So the king says, Mordecai, you figure it out, right? So Mordecai wrote a new edict, all right, that says that the Jews are allowed to defend themselves. So basically, what we have with these two edicts, we have declared a civil war basically within. But that obviously is written in such a way that you know that the king now sides with the Jews, and moreover, Mordecai becomes the prime minister. So the prime minister is a Jew, the queen is a Jew, right? So a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, the king has switched side to the Jews. So many people made themselves Jews. No idea how that happened. So they converted to become Jews, right? They took up circumcision or something like that, all right? And so happily ever after, no, there's still the battle. So it'll be a very strange story if at that time, all right, after all these things, the Jews lost the war. You know, of course, the Jews won. And the Jews won, and so therefore, that instituted a festival called Purim. Purim, plural for pur. Pur means the rolling of a dice. So it's a rolling of the dice, and you're supposed to be like it's like Mardi Gras. It's absolutely wild. This particular, it's loud, it's noisy, it's crazy. All right, it is very it's the opposite of Passover. Passover is super solemn. Day of Atonement super solemn. This is the wild one. All right, there's bazaar. It's a pesta. It's pesta, right? That kind of a thing. So Gentiles identify as Jews. Then there's two banquets of the Jews, and then it ends with greatness of Ahasuerus and Mordecai. That's the story. What's the question? Why don't mention God? Right? Why don't mention God? Yeah. Why not? Why suppress him? Is it because the Jews have been suppressing God? You are now Mordecai the Jew. Your name was Hadassah, but no, you go by Esther. In order to climb the social ladder, Mordecai instructed Esther to not reveal her identity because it will be a net negative for her career. It worked. She became queen. Can't go higher than that. You really climb the ladder. Correct. You know, you don't call yourself. If you reveal your Jewishness, what happens? What happens? What happens when Mordecai was, do not bow down to Haman the Agagite? It's like, why not bow down? Because Haman is an Agagite. You know what's an Agagite? It's from Agag. Agag is that group of people that Agag was the king that King Saul was tasked by God to kill and exterminate the Agagites. King Saul didn't do it. And so here we have Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite of the of Saul's clan to come and finish the job.
Very strategic places in this entire broad.
You say God, it doesn't mention God. So is there God? See, because when we think of when God acts like Moses split the Red Sea or something, Jesus walked on water, right? It's always the miraculous. But how often are things miraculous in that way? Suspension of natural laws. When you don't see suspension of natural laws, does it mean God is not working? God is working. Throughout the whole thing, you see God's provision and providence, even though you don't talk about Him, even though you haven't been faithful, right? Even though you're just thinking about your own survival, even though you think that I should deny my identity as God's people in order to make progress in life, in order to have the good life. I went further east to Susa to make a living, right? And it worked. Esther became queen. Is that really salvation? Oh no, if you don't come into congruence with your identity as God's people, then annihilation will come. But only when Esther fully identified as a Jew, as God's people, then came salvation and flourishing. A lot of Christians are Christians on Sunday, but they go to work on Monday. There's no trace of Christianity in them, because being a Christian, if you really congruent with your values as a Christian, you make it public, then you can't go far in the world. Can't climb that ladder. That may be what you think. Huh?
But climb God.
Yeah, because you think everything is just a roll of a dice. Purim. Is it really a roll of the dice, or is God in control? Yeah. God is a hand inside behind, right, inside the glove. It's true. That is a very positivistic reading of Esther. I have a very negativistic reading of Esther. It has all of that. It is not the hiddenness of God, that God is hiding, that you have hid God. Stop hiding God. Esther and Mordecai, they are compromised heroes. They are deeply compromised. Didn't return to the land, went further east, on Babylonian names, so much so that we don't even know Mordecai's Jewish name, and told the girl who has a Jewish name, Hadassah, stop using Hadassah. Man, you want to survive in this place, you can't be Hadassah. You can't call yourself Hadassah. Everyone will know, okay? Call yourself Stephen. Feng Jianfai tak laku. You know what I mean? So Stephen Feng gets you further in life. Okay, so that is the book of Esther. I'm really behind time. I'm so sorry. I'm going to go to the book of Ruth. I think this is the last class, a bit longer, can I? This is our final class. All right. The book of Ruth has 4 chapters. So I studied the book of Esther. My supervisor studies the book of Ruth. So for some reason, both of us men studying books where the female character is the prominent character. So very interesting. So the book of Ruth. So we are both feminists of some sort, I suppose. So the book of Ruth. 4 chapters. It begins with an exile. One day there was a famine in Bethlehem, which is ironic because Bethlehem means the house of bread. Bethlehem, which means the house of bread. So house of bread, no bread, famine. Why famine? Why famine? Why is there famine in the land? Because covenantal curse. Right? Deuteronomy says covenantal faithfulness, blessing. Covenantal curse, famine. Right? And if you are really unfaithful, then end up in exile. Correct? So that's what happened. So this is the time of the judges, it says. During the time of judges, there was a famine in the land. That means it's during a down period, right? A bad period. And there was a man by the name of Elimelech, which means my God is king. Decided to, so my God is king guy, right? From the from the town of House of Bread, decided to leave the land of Israel and go into the land of Moab, to sojourn the land of Moab, because I think I can find a better future in Moab, the place whereby the Moabites are banned from the presence of the Lord for 10 generations, unto the 10th generation. That means you want to have nothing to do with the presence of the Lord anymore. I'm done with God, right? I'm with the Babylonians. I'm with the Moabites. That's what it means. He brought, 10th generation, nobody can remember forever, it means. Okay. But unto the 10th generation, not allowed into the presence of God, into the assembly of God, right? So I said, I don't want to be with the assembly of God. To be in God's assembly, what happens? Famine. Right? I'm out. So brought his wife Naomi and 2 sons. And they went and they settled down. They said they sojourned. But it looks like less like sojourn, look like settled down, because the sons took Moabiters' wives. Okay, so they settled down. Then Elimelech died. His 2 sons died. That is the beginning. The story begins with exile, with famine, exile, death. And so now left Naomi, the old widow, with 2 young daughters-in-law, widows, and say, I need to get back to Israel. I need to get back to Israel. 2 of you are Moabites. I got nothing to do for you. What do you want from me? You want me to now suddenly get married, have a son, and then give my son, wait for him to grow into adult, and then give to you in marriage? Like, what do you want from me? Go back to your father's house. Go back to where you're Moabites. I'm going back to Israel. So one daughter-in-law said, that makes sense, right? But the other one, Ruth, she's like, no. She told Naomi, you can't go back alone. It's rather dangerous. Think about it, right? For a woman to travel back alone. She says to Naomi, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you dwell, I will dwell. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do unto me and more as well, if anything but death sets us apart. Wow! What a powerful, so powerful that I memorized it. so it's so powerful. And it's like, when Naomi saw her persistence, so Naomi says, okay, right, let's go. Let's go back to Bethlehem. And so the 2 women showing kindness, shows the kindness, so they return to Bethlehem. And it says that, and both Naomi and Ruth returned to Bethlehem. Now, Naomi returning to Bethlehem, that makes sense. She's from Bethlehem. Ruth returning with her to Bethlehem. Why return? Because the word for return is shuv, which is also the word for repent. Right? So it's the return to the land is a repentance. If you wander away from the Lord, you end up in exile, right? And then so you return to the Lord, that is, you return to the land, that is to repent. So they returned, and it was the barley harvest, which means what? It's abundance. Abundance. That means it's a new beginning. Barley harvest is also the new year. So it's a new year, new beginning, new creation, new life. Hallelujah. Return. Okay. So that these 2 widows, right? An older widow and a younger widow, how are they going to fend for themselves in Bethlehem? There's a harvest going on. Well, there's a law in Israel. This law seems to be tailor-made for Ruth. It is for the alien, right? It's for the foreigner, it is for the widow, and it's for the orphan, right? She checked all three boxes. Okay, she checked all these boxes, and the law is that Israel, during the harvest, you can glean the field, but you cannot glean the edges of the field, right? That is to be left for the foreigners. And if you glean something and you hold the sheaves and one fell to the ground, right? You can't pick it up. It is for this class of people, right? It's for the underclass. So Ruth also went to glean, and so happened, right? She was in Boaz's field, and Boaz has this is the time of the judges, right? That means times are bad, right? Most of the time. But this Boaz, this suddenly is a different. He and his workers has this great relationship, and they begin with something like "Blessed be the Lord." Hi, blessed be the Lord. It's so spiritual. Everybody is so spiritual in Boaz's field, and Boaz said, "Who's that?" That's Ruth. Oh, okay. Naomi's daughter-in-law, and she's okay. Tell her to stay in this field, because if we go outside, who knows what happened, right? Now, in the 21st century, a woman walk outside at night or in the alley, whatever, she can reasonably expect to go home safe. And if she doesn't, it's a problem. Right? It's going to be all over the news and going to ask why. Right? Back then, of course, something's going to happen to you. Are you stupid or what? Right? So don't go anyway. Stay in the field. Stay in my field. And don't disturb her. Let her glean as much as she can glean. Okay. So when she got home to Naomi, it's like, whoa, how did you come up with so much stuff? You can't just be gleaning around the edges. What's going on? Say, oh, because this is what's his name? His name is Boaz. Boaz, isn't that my relative? Oh, he can be our kinsman redeemer. That means there's a law. There's another law that seems to be tailor-made for her. That's called the Levirate law. The Levirate law is that if someone from your if a man, he dies, leaves a widow without a child, then the brother, right, needs to take her as wife and raise a son for the dead brother, so that you can inherit the land. Does that make sense? All right. So because of this law, they always say there's this law in Israel, you need to go for it. Boaz qualifies to be our kinsman redeemer. So that's the end of chapter 2. So chapter 3, Naomi tells Ruth a plan. You need to go to hide in the threshing floor, and when it's the barley harvest, so you can make barley beer out of that. And then when Boaz comes into the threshing floor, he's going to be drunk, all right? And then he will sleep, right? And when he dozes off, and then you uncover his legs. Uncover his leg, which is what's it called? How do we say something in order to not say the actual thing? Say something nicer. I can't remember the word. Instead of saying the word itself, which is rather rude or something like that, right? You say something in a different way, in a softer way, all right? So that you don't actually say so leg could mean leg, all right? But it actually refers to the private part. Or feet, yeah, it's the same word, regel. All right, regel is also a metaphor for the word is not a metaphor for some reason I cannot remember the word. All right, to mean the private part. So expose it. So at night he felt a bit windy, all right, and that is a signal to him that she wants to be married to him. And so when Boaz woke up and said, what's all this thing about? Then Ruth says, put your cloak over me because you are my kinsman redeemer. And so Boaz understood what happened. And then so Boaz says, okay, tomorrow morning, when in the morning, okay, I'm going to go to the city gate. I will redeem you. But there is someone else who is much closer to you than to me. So legally, right, that man should redeem you. But if he refuses, then I will redeem you. And before they could recognize each other, that means it is to say that they never consummated that night, right? So it was all still proper. And you said, wow, this doesn't seem morally right. Yeah, as a 21st century person, you say this is a bit weird, but back then it wasn't considered weird. After all, she's a Moabitess, you know. What do Moabitess know about what is proper, improper, but it's suggestion by Naomi. All right, anyways, so she came home and Naomi said, yes, this man, he will do what is right. So then the next morning, Boaz went to the city gate where the council meets and to say, hey, you are the kinsman redeemer, you redeem Ruth. They say, okay, I'll do it. But then here's the poison pill. The poison pill is that then, you have to raise a son for her, and then your estate will get diluted. Because now that property, part of it, you have to go to this son that you're producing for Ruth, that will be under the brother's name. That's not under your family name, right? So I said, no, I won't do it, right? And Boaz knows that this is going to happen, and so that, okay, since you're not going to do it, I will redeem her. And so Ruth and Boaz gets married, and then here is the last paragraph of Ruth that is worth reading. This is where the story has been going towards the whole time. It says, now verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife, and she went in to her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Verse 14, then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and the nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi, so the story is really actually not about Ruth, really. The story really is actually about the restoration of Naomi through Ruth. Anyways, then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. And they named him Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now, these are the generations of Perez. Perez father Hezron, Hezron father Ram, Ram father Aminadab, Aminadab father Nashon, Nashon father Salmon, Salmon father Boaz, Boaz father Obed, Obed father Jesse, and Jesse father David. That's the punchline. The punchline is that these are the ancestors and ancestresses of King David. What is this story about? Now, of course, you can say that this points to Christ, etc., who is our kinsman, redeemer, and redeems us. That's fine, right? We are Gentile Moabites, okay, as long as we place our faith. And in fact, this has been used by Jewish rabbis to say that this is the standard model of how to convert Gentiles to Judaism. Huh? No. By doing what wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you dwell, I will dwell. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do unto me, and more as well, if anything but death pass me from you. So this is the prime candidate, all right? And we make them make this Ruth confession, all right? So this serves as a template as to, and even marriage, yeah. So you talk about, so what happens? So what is this story about? Now, what is this story about has a lot to do with when you think this book was written. Now, if this book was written, say, by Samuel, right, because traditionally the book of Ruth is ascribed to Samuel, then this would be basically a pro-David party, and then you'll be something like this, hey, David is the king of Israel. Do you know that his great-grandmother, something, all right, was a Moabitess? Moabitess, how can he be our king? Right? So then this will be a propaganda to justify David's lineage, to say that, look, she is like Proverbs 31 woman. In fact, in the traditional sequencing, Ruth is right after Proverbs 31. Intentionally. Because Proverbs really, big part of Proverbs is about how to find a good wife. Right? And the best chapter about how to find a good wife is chapter 31 of Proverbs, the last chapter of Proverbs, right? But of how to find a God-fearing wife, the profile of a God-fearing wife. And then the next chapter is Ruth, chapter 1, right? To show that Ruth is that woman that you want to be looking for, right? So she's ideal. She is ideal, even though she's a Moabitess. So you could do that, right? Or you could say, well, it might be written after the exile. After all, that's why it made it into part of the writings instead of the prophets. You know, it could be one reason, right? Why it's part of the writings. Or even if it's not written then, because the stories, we know this from way back when, because it's a story, right? Of David's ancestress. We know that story, but just that now, again, there's a storyteller who frames it in a way that he wants to frame it, right? Or at least the way it is heard by people coming back from exile will be exactly the opposite of what Ezra and Nehemiah has been teaching. Right? So if we see Ezra and Nehemiah as the mainstream, right, then this is maybe doesn't rise up to the point of sedition, but definitely subverting, right? Subverting what Ezra and Nehemiah is talking about. Because wait a minute, don't just divorce all foreign wives. All right. Let me give you the worst of Moabitess. How about Moabitess? Oh, that's the worst of them all, right? Moabitess. Okay. How about a Moabitess like Ruth? And let me tell you about Ruth. And tell. And you know who was Ruth? Ruth was David's great-great-grandmother, the king. Shut up. So maybe it's about that. You see? So the Bible is rather polyphonic in this way. It's very fascinating to me. All right. So that is the polyphonic. It's a multiple sound, multiple voice, right? Polyphonic. Yeah. Right. Who? 1142. Oh my goodness. The book of Daniel. The book of Daniel, again, is a story of exile. Now think about book of Ruth just now. It's a story about exile. You know, Elimelech going to exile. So this would really resonate with people who came back from exile. Right? Going back to exile, you die, then you know, and then Naomi came back with a Gentile to return to. What kind of story is that? That is a subversive story if I've ever heard one during the exile. Yeah. Okay. So this is just because a setting is the time of Judges doesn't mean it's written during the time of Judges. Of course, it must be written after the time of Judges, but doesn't have to be immediately after. Does that make sense? Okay. So the jury is still out, I suppose, on which is the correct reading. But at least people reading, even if it's written earlier, but people reading during the time of exile would have processed it in their own context. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's the book of Daniel. Here's another one, a similar one. Daniel ended up in exile. Okay. And it's written in Hebrew. And it's about his faithfulness despite exile. It's none of his fault, but then he has been faithful. He and his 3 friends, and they were to eat food, meat offered to idols, I suppose. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to eat vegetables. Right? We're going to eat vegetables. And that is Daniel chapter 1. And then they became, they entered the civil service. And they were given Babylonian names. And it's okay to what can compromise? What can compromise? It's kind of taking on the Babylonian names, no problem. Serving the Gentile government, no problem. All right? Entering a Gentile civil service, no problem. But where do you stop? You stop when it comes to God's law. Right? Food, right? Ethics, who to worship, no compromise. So this is a story about how to live in exile. How to live in exile. You can go the Esther route, which is like almost completely assimilated. That they didn't even know. They didn't even know. Haman didn't even know Esther was Jewish. Right? You know what I mean? Haman didn't even know. Nobody knew she was Jewish. That she's so assimilated into the Persian culture, Babylonian Persian culture, right? So that's that. But Daniel was like, he's a Jew. Everybody knows he's a Jew. And then we go into Daniel chapter 2 to Daniel chapter 7, which is in Aramaic. So the book is in two languages. Daniel chapter 1 is in Hebrew until chapter 2 verse 4 thereabout. And then Daniel chapter 8 to 12 is in Hebrew. And then in between there's this chiasm that is, the setting is in Babylon and it's written in Aramaic, right? Which was the lingua franca of the day. All right, so it's two different languages. This is the reason why I didn't major in the book of Daniel, because I just couldn't stomach learning another language. You have to learn both Hebrew and Aramaic. No, I'm done. So that's that. So it begins with Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and it ends with Daniel has a dream. Nebuchadnezzar's dream is about fourth kingdom, and then there's a fifth eternal kingdom. Daniel's vision is about four beasts and the fifth eternal kingdom. So it parallels. And then Daniel chapter 3, there's this friends of Daniel Kena what? Fiery furnace, delivered from death because refused to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's idol. And then Daniel chapter 6, we have Daniel being thrown to the lion's den. Why? Because he refused to stop praying to God. Right? So it's about worship. It's about allegiance to God, right? And both end up in a terrible place, fiery furnace, lion's den, and both were delivered from death. And so in the middle, interestingly, is about how Gentile kings and Gentile kingdoms, all right, relate to God. So Nebuchadnezzar, he related to God by saying that I built all these things by my own hands. All right. So I became great and then God punished him. But then he turned to God. Right? That's one way to relate to God. Another way is Belshazzar, another king, right? A later king. And he also did terrible things, much worse things. At least he took vessels that Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought it to his own Marduk's temple. But then he said these things belong to the gods. He doesn't understand anything, right? But these are holy stuff. Holy stuff belongs to holy place. All right. So he put it. He respected that. He respected that. But Belshazzar is like, let's just take those vessels and let's drink wine from those vessels, right? So then, and his pride was judged, blasphemed God, and he died. So there's two ways for Gentiles to relate to God. That's that. And after all that story, then comes Daniel chapter 8 to 12, and the story, and it returns to Hebrew. And now the genre from chapter 7 onwards become unrecognizable. Where stories. Chapter 7, especially chapter 8, the story it's not a story anymore. It becomes visions, and it's all, it's like, what is going on? This is called apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature, the word apocalypse, all right, means unveiling. Unveiling means that there's something going on in the world right now. You ask, why is it like this? Okay, and I let you to see behind the curtain to see what is actually going on. So I use this like wayang kulit, right? Wayang kulit, if you sit in front of the screen, then you see a story being played, wayang kulit, right? There's this story going on. And if you ask the question, why is it like this? All right? Why is it like this? Then what I do is that I bring you behind the screen and you can see a very different picture going on. Something very different is going, but it's related. The front and the back is related. And the causation is this way, right? The back of the screen caused things going on in the front of the screen. Then when you see what's going on in the back of the screen, go, whoa, now I understand now. That is what apocalypse means, revelation means. It means an unveiling. It means letting you see behind the screen. So in front of the screen, you see a story. You go behind the screen, you see something else. So likewise, in front of the screen, you see world events. All right. You see things happening in the world. You see Russia, Ukraine. You see Israel, Hamas. You see all these things, right? You see Trump, Kamala, right? You see all these things. You see in Malaysia as well. Okay, between PH, PN, all of that. Is ask why. Then you see that the physical reality, and then a revelation will be bringing you to see the spiritual reality behind it, the spiritual forces at play. All right, right? Spiritual evil that's going on behind the screen. They say, that's why. Now, the world here is a story world. The world here is rather different, right? So how do we know that we're talking about this world or that other world? So when the author is talking about this world, it uses normal language. When the author is talking about the other world, the spiritual realm, okay, it uses very bombastic language. Monsters and beasts and horns and whatnot and eyes and all of that, right? To make sure that you know the difference between when you're talking about this world and when you're talking about the other world. Does that make sense? Right. So that is what Apocalypse is about. So this genre was very popular sometime between 200 BC to 200 AD. All right, 300 BC to 300 BC to 200 AD, whereby when the Jews were under severe persecution by the Greeks, all right, and by the Romans later. So and they use this to explain, right, why are bad things happening to us right now? Terrible things are happening to us right now. Why? I bring you behind the scene and you can see these spiritual forces at play. Then you recognize God's sovereignty, that eventually righteousness will win. So we need to remain faithful to God. And so this is what this chapter 7 onwards, but especially 8 to 12 says, that now we're back in the Holy Land. Now that we are back in the Holy Land, right? We have returned from exile as promised. Why is life still hard? Why are we still under various foreign occupation? What is God's plan for us? So Daniel chapter 8 to 12 is that life is hard. How can we live? Then you draw lessons from Daniel 1 to 7, right, as the blueprint to how to live through this 200 BC to 300 BC, especially during the Greek era. You read the first Maccabees, it was terrible time to live as Jewish people, to be faithful Jewish people in the Holy Land. And the idea is that, well, the reason why this is going on is because something else is going on behind the scenes. Satan is active. His demons are active, in control of world affairs. But we need to remember that God is ultimately in control. One day He is going to come and judge all these beasts. All right, and then righteousness will prevail. So you don't think that you die, that's the end of the day. No. When you die, Daniel chapter 12 says some will all rise, right? And then some to everlasting life, some to eternal contempt, right? So stay faithful, because God will return to judge one day. So that's what the book of Daniel is about. That's what Chronicles. This one I'll go through very quickly. Chronicles, Chronicles, like, why am I reading this book? Because it just sounds like Samuel and Kings over again. It is true. It is Samuel and Kings. It repeats the content of Samuel and Kings. And in the traditional or Jewish order of the Bible, Chronicles comes as the last book of the writings. All right, it is the last book. And so it summarizes all of Jewish scripture. The first word is Adam. Right? The first word in Chronicles is Adam. And the last word is let him go up. Go up, right? That means return to. So basically it's a summary of the entire Old Testament, beginning from Adam, all right, to now let's return to the land. Right? If anyone wants to go up, let him go up. It ends with King Cyrus. So why is it repeating the content? Well, what is the content first? First of all, chapter 1 to 9, I agree, boring. It's just the genealogies. If you can't sleep at night, you're having insomnia, you just read Chronicles, First Chronicles 1 to 9. It just reads exactly like the phone book, yellow pages right? Try reading the yellow pages for leisure. Yes, names of the names of the names of the names, 9 chapters of it. All right. So then, but basically, it summarizes the storyline of amazing key characters, but focuses on 2 things: on the Messianic king, right? The Messianic king. That means the line of Judah, Perez, has run all the way to David. That is although there's a lot of Israelites names to be included, but the one that want to focus is the line that leads to David, and also the line of Aaron, the priesthood. So the king and the priesthood is the two focus of the genealogies. All right, and then we start telling the stories about David. Now, but the author, the chronicler, we call him the chronicler. The chronicler left out very important stories of David. For example, his persecution by Saul, left out. His adultery and murder of the story of the wife of Uriah, right, Bathsheba, left out. But instead, we have this new material about the positive stories of David. In 2 Samuel, David was barred from building the temple, right? And that's the end of the story. Solomon built a temple. Solomon was the one who used the resources to build a temple. But then in Chronicles, we have David preparing the temple. All right. Now again, this is called Chronicles. First Chronicles, Second Chronicles is basically just the Chronicles. It's one book, Chronicles. Okay. And then David plans for the temple. David prepares for the temple. So I ask the question, why this new material? Why suppress the bad stuff about David? All right. Why introduce some new stuff about David that is good? Because it is to portray David as an image of the future Messianic king. That means it is recasting David, all right, to look for a new David in the future. Does that make sense? Because now we've come back from exile. Samuel Kings is written during the exile. It's bleak. It's bleak. Now that we've come back from exile, we need to reinterpret our history, all right, in a positive light, because now we have come back, we're looking forward to the future. And what do we have in the future to look forward to? What did the prophet say that we're going to have? We're going to have the Messiah. We're going to have the son of David, the greater son of David that will come to bring about restoration. So therefore, when the Messiah comes, how will he look like? He'll look like David, but much greater. So therefore, there's a polished up version of David in First Chronicles. And then in the Second Chronicles, there's a story of all the kings in Jerusalem, just as usual. But the new material is to show, we even left out all the kings of northern Israel. We don't care. We really focus on David's line. All right. So Judah, and the new material about obedient kings leading to success and blessing. All right. And unfaithful kings leading to failure and hardship. So this character studies is to, the Messiah will be the amalgamation of all of these. The Messiah will not have any of these, kind of a thing, right? So at the ending is, King Cyrus says, whoever there is among you of all his people, may the Lord his God be with him and let him go up to Jerusalem. Let him go up. It's an incomplete sentence. Let him go up. Where? Because there's the prophetic hope that let him go up to Jerusalem, the temple, and wait for the Messiah to come and bring about the restoration of Jerusalem, to bring about the new Jerusalem. Let him go up to wait for the coming of the new Jerusalem. Okay, so that is the Chronicles, a story in search of an ending. Right? So the Old Testament story ends, or canon, the Hebrew Bible canon ends with Chronicles, let him go up and wait for the Messiah. And so that's how the Ketuvim ends, and thus ends our walkthrough of the Old Testament Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Next time, we will be doing an overview of the New Testament. All right, we'll start in January. We'll take a break for Chinese New Year, and then we would power through all the way until Easter. Is that okay? All right. So we'll be doing the New Testament companion version of these classes. All right. Okay. So the end. Let's see people online.